Hi.
Greetings, greetings.
Hello.
Hey there. Hey there. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing amazing. Doing amazing. Today's been amazing. Yeah.
Great.
Yes, the energy is raising. And I just want to make sure that I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Is it Ah- Aharona?
Yes.
How do you pronounce it?
Aharona.
Aharona.
Yeah.
That's a very unique name, Aharona. Please let me know, where is it from?
It's Hebrew. It's from my great grandfather who was Aharon. It's actually like always a male name. It's Hebrew for Aaron. So Aharon, but then they like added an A at the end to make it female. But I have never met another Aharona. And I've met Aharons, and sometimes I meet people from Israel who are like, Aharona is not really a name. And that's what they gave me. So,
But you've embraced it.
yes.
You embraced it, you're like, this is my name, this is who me, yeah. Hebrew, okay, so it's Hebrew, so you said it means Aaron.
Yeah. And I was given an English name as well, but this is the name that's like from a family member. My English name, which is Susan, was just kind of a name that my parents liked. But Aharona has a little more meaning to me. But
Yeah.
a lot of my life, people were calling me Susan or Susie or, you know,
and
different things.
and when you say Aharona, has a lot more meaning to you. What do you feel when you think of the meaning? Like, what does the meaning feel to you?
Just that it's like a family name, like that it comes from somewhere other than my parents just being like, oh, that's a nice name. Like in the Jewish tradition, you're generally named after a person who's passed away in the family. And, sometimes it's the English name that your parents will give you. And in my case, it was just the Hebrew name that they gave me. So, like when I was a kid, the only time that people really used that name was when I was in Hebrew school. But then at a certain point in my adult life, it's a long story, but I was at this place, a rainbow gathering, and all these people were calling me Aharona because I was spending time at Jerusalem camp. They had the only like organic kitchen. And I met so many people at that time that met me as Aharona that just kind of took over. And then since then, it's like most people call me Aharona.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you for just that bit of history like that, just taking us down memory lane because you called it, was it Hebrew school or what was the school you called it?
Yeah. I mean, I was raised Jewish, so we weren't like religious, but I went to Hebrew school and had bat mitzvah and all that. And that was like a very big part of my upbringing. Not when I was very young, but when I was 9, we moved from the Chicago suburbs to Omaha, Nebraska, where there's like not a big Jewish population, but then like that Jewish population that was there was very close knit and active. And so then I started going to Hebrew school, and yeah, that was like a big part of my growing up
Wow.
situation.
Wow, Aharona, Omaha, Nebraska. Well, first of all, that's where one of my favorite boxers is from, Omaha, Nebraska, Terrence Crawford. I don't know if you know
Okay.
Terrence Crawford.
No, I don't know anything about
He's
boxing.
one of my favorite of all time, but they call him the pride of Omaha.
Oh,
Omaha.
okay.
Yeah. But my goodness, Aharona, when you're moving from Chicago to Nebraska, you said at 9? You
Yeah.
were 9 years old? That's a big shift.
Yeah, it was pretty traumatic. Like my whole family's from Chicago. We were super close with my cousins and extended family, and it was really rough. It was like we just went there because my dad got a good job offer that he wanted to pursue, and It was not the easiest time. That's when my vision started going and I started wearing glasses. There's like a lot in that move.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you said it was very traumatic for you, you know, even at that age, because how long did you stay in Omaha at that time?
Till I left for college when I was 18.
Wow.
Yeah.
So from 9 to 18, so almost a decade almost.
Yeah. And then my parents got divorced my first year in school, away at school, and then my mom moved back to Chicago right away. So now it's like, when I go to visit family, I go to Chicago now, or the suburbs of Chicago. Although my dad is still in Omaha and my stepmom, and I do see them on occasion. But yeah.
Yeah, very reminiscent, you know, like I've seen so much breaking up and so many divorces in my family as well. And, you know, I had separations and divorce of my own. So, you know, I'd seen a lot in the home, just a lot of dysfunction, a lot of, you know, family feuding, a lot of arguments that I was raised just seeing a lot of turmoil and a lot of traumatic experiences as well, because when you're talking about how traumatic it was for you during that period from 9 to 18 when you finally left, what do you feel was the most challenging and how did you overcome it? Like how did you rise above it to who we see here today?
Oh my gosh. Stay quiet, hide away, just go to your room and read. And I mean, there was a lot. I mean, yes, there's the one thing of like my parents not getting along and dealing with all that, but I have a lot of old issues with my dad and how he was, and you know, we're in a good place now, and it's something we've worked on a lot over the years, but like, his parenting style at the time was not something to necessarily be admired. So, yeah, at the time, the tactic was I was very, very quiet, like very, very quiet. And I just was like, I was a very good kid. Like I didn't really ever do anything wrong. Like I was like straight A student, and my parents never like pushed me to be good or be a straight A student or something like that, but I just did. Like it was just easy for me, and that's what happened. And so, you know, I had a really nice childhood. Like I had a great childhood, but definitely, looking back on it, there are a lot of things that were going on that, like, I think about it a lot in terms of my vision because I have incredibly poor vision. Like, I'm extremely nearsighted, and I've done a lot of research into natural vision improvement and how to do all that. And like all these books I've read all talk about how most people start losing their vision after about a year after some traumatic event, and that it can be like a childhood move or your parents getting divorced or like a death in the family or something like that. But like especially for young people, when they start losing their vision, it has to do with a trauma that just happened. And I started losing my vision just about a year after we moved. And so I've looked a lot at that. And it's kind of like all these books I read, they talk about how it's almost like this defense mechanism, like you don't want to see what's in front of you. And so you literally start, and for me, I unfortunately was with this eye doctor who, then you go every year and get tested, and he's like, maybe we can make it a little bit stronger and you'll see a little more clearly. And then it's like, the stronger your glasses are, the weaker your eyes get. So every year or two, getting a stronger prescription till I was about 18, left for home, it's like, my prescription is so strong. So I've looked a lot at like, what was it that I didn't want to see? And it all has to do with my father, you know? And it's like, I love my dad. I don't want to get on here and just start talking shit about my dad or anything. But like, yeah, I mean, he knows that there were a lot of things that were not so great, that in the way he treated us or spoke to us or whatever. And so, yeah, it was like, you know, a lot that you don't want to see. And I mean, getting to like the diet stuff that I think is the reason why we mostly wanted to have this interview, I see how it relates even today to like when I have a hard time with something, it's still that same old pattern of like not wanting to really see something. And so, you know, with the vision, it was like, okay, bring things in closer and closer and closer to where, like, if I don't have my glasses on, the nearest, the closest something needs to be for me to see it with total clarity is like here, you know, like if it's anywhere past like here, it's blurry. And, you know, it kind of like softens the world. And now, you know, as an adult, like ever since I got into the natural vision improvement thing, it's like I don't want that anymore. I want to see clearly, but I'm so far gone that it's, you know, it takes a lot of work to get back. But anyway, I feel like there's this tendency, like I know that, and I've known for so many years that I feel best when I stay really super light, like really light on liquids, don't have any density, and just keep with that. But how often do I do that? And how long do those stretches of staying really light last? Like, that is a major work in progress, you know? And I so often see that when I go for density, you know, there's so many reasons why I might go for density, but definitely the emotional piece has to do with that same kind of thing of like not wanting to fully see what is happening. And my instinct from childhood is like zone out, find a way to kind of zone out. Like as a kid, I read a ton of books and watched a ton of television. And, you know, I mean, whatever, I had a normal childhood growing up in the 80s. Like, I think a lot of kids watched a lot of television and whatever. And I still, you know, I had a great life. I had a good time at school. I had a lot of friends. Like, I had activities outside of school. But my home life, like I really watched a lot of television, read a lot of books, and it's like I still love that kind of escape into story. And also growing up, like my family, so I grew up eating like really crappy food. Okay. It's totally, you know, that sad standard American diet. Yeah. I was eating like a very sad version of the sad, let's say, you know?
Same.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, and not just that, but my family's like very into food, you know, like you go to a family party and it's all about what you're eating and who's bringing what, and this, you know, this holiday we get to eat this and da 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 da. And so it's like when I get this sort of like nostalgia for childhood or something, or I'm like having a rough time emotionally and have those instincts to where we just want to be in that sort of child self where you were just loved and protected, hopefully. I mean, I personally was like, I had a very safe and protected and loving home. And, you know, my dad was like very much the provider. and my mom was very much the lover, you know, and my mom and I have always been super close. She's still just, I mean, we talk every day. She's my closest person in the world.
Right.
But when I get those like tendencies to want to like be in that place or something, there's this instinct to like go for food. And if it's because of like, oh, it's the holidays and I'm feeling that, you know, that's one thing. But if it's like an emotional thing, like I'm having a hard time with something emotionally, there's this instinct to just like zone out. And the way to do that nowadays, for me, the easiest way to do that is to like go for some density. And, you know, when I'm super light, it's like the reason why I want to be super light and why I love being super light is like many reasons, but top reason is the consciousness that comes and the presence and being in the moment and like feeling everything so much and just being so aware of everything. And but you know, like sometimes whether it's a good thing I'm experiencing or a really difficult thing I'm experiencing, either end of the spectrum, sometimes it's just like too much and too overwhelming. And you know, I'm nowadays like trying to work with that and stop the cycle of like just going for a soup or, you know, something more dense when I'm feeling that, and like use some other tool, like just lay down and give myself some Reiki, or, you know, like use the energy some other way, like do some more pranayama or, you know, some other kind of yoga practice or something. Because I have all these practices that I do every day, like, you know, like I've taken over my life. But it's one thing to like, you do your practice every day because you know it's good for you. And if you don't do it, you feel how you don't feel good. But it's another thing to like learn how to use those practices in your rough moments to prevent you from doing some habit that you're trying to break, you know, like something that you've done so long and okay, it worked for you for a while, but it's clearly not working for you anymore. So now it's time to like try this other thing.
Exactly. Exactly. Wow. Wow. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, I just want to thank you just for all your vulnerability, just for all your transparency, and just being so forthcoming about your journey and your learnings, even in the challenging moments, like the really tough
Oh yeah.
times, the really rough times that you've gone through, and just, you know, with your family, with your parents. You know, I love that you say you talk to your mother, you know, often now, and that you have that relationship with her. And, you know, the dynamic with your father, you know, I was thinking to myself, like, I've seen my father, you know, angry so many times, and I feel like I absorbed in my childhood, I feel like I absorbed a lot of that anger without understanding. I didn't really understand what was going on, but I saw myself exhibiting patterns and just these different emotions that when I look back, they were emotions that I had witnessed when I was younger. So it was like I was playing out
Mm,
kind of the same patterns, the same loops, the same cycle as, you know, my parents in a way. So,
yeah.
you know, it's interesting when you're talking about this Aharona because, you know, when it comes to the eyesight, I had one interview with a lady. Her name is Wanda, amazing lady. She was going blind. I mean, doctors, she was eating a very meat-centric diet, so she was eating, you know, everything just to do with protein, 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 animals, you know, and just consuming as much protein as she could, basically. And, you know, her eyesight was just getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And doctors never really asked her, like, what was she eating? At no point in her journey did her doctors or her medical, you know, physician, they never asked her, like,
Yeah.
well, what are you eating? Like, what is your lifestyle, your style of living? Like, what are you giving? What are you consuming? And Aharona, when she went on a liquid lifestyle, she went on a solid food vacation for a time. She said she didn't care. She just kept on juicing, and she cured her eyesight. She said her eyesight came back. She was going blind, and she was just juicing, going blind, and her eyesight came back. You know,
Yeah.
she still wears glasses today, but she cured her blindness purely by fasting, purely by
Yeah.
juicing.
I
Just
mean, people hear everything through this
yeah,
stuff. Everything. It's like for sure.
it's
And
crazy.
I
Yeah.
get inspired about that. I mean, for me, it's like I know I can do it, but it involves letting go of the glasses. And I like to live in society. I gotta use them to do the things I do. So I'm always just like, for decades, I'm just like, the last time I had one period of time where it was like my early 20s. I just got into the natural vision improvement thing, and had the opportunity. I was living somewhere where I could just be without the glasses, but I was like living in a shack in the bush in Ghana in West Africa. And it was like, I didn't need to socialize at all. I didn't, because that's the hardest thing is like without my glasses, I can't see people's facial expressions at all.
Okay.
So obviously it's like, yeah, I need them to like use the computer or drive, those kind of things. But even, nowadays it's like, I mean, I do drive, but not that much right now. I think about it a lot. Like, I could just do a vision retreat here, like there are ways that I could do it here, like give myself 2 weeks where I'm just going to be like mostly blind and like work with the exercises and stuff and stay super light and see what can happen in the space of like just a couple weeks of kind of changing my life enough to do that. But the dream is to like, go somewhere beautiful and like be in nature and really just like chuck the glasses for like a few months or a year or however long
Yeah.
it takes. Yeah, that's something it's like the biggest thing I always want to get back to, like there's that one period of time and I saw improvement, but that was like 99 2000. That was like my very first inklings of getting into any kind of dietary change where
Mhm.
like actually it was from reading about the eye stuff that I first did any kind of like cleansing thing, because one of the books talked about doing like a 10-day elimination diet where you just do like fruits or stewed
Mhm.
vegetables just to like clean out the system. And is basically like Arnold Ehret's mucusless diet, from if you've ever read Arnold Ehret's mucusless diet healing system, which when I did finally get really into this stuff, like a year or two later, that book was like my Bible when I was just starting out with cleansing and stuff, like explained everything so perfectly. But anyway, that experience of like doing that kind of elimination diet was like my first entry into seeing the connection between my health and my diet and how diet affected me and stuff like that. And I already had become like vegan and had done that for, I don't know, a few years or something before that. But like, it was
Wow. Wow.
anyway.
So that was the catalyst that catapulted you into that frequency when you're coming, from a lot of density, with the dieting, a lot of density, but then you're just kind of peeling back the layers. Like myself, I was raised on eating everything, everything you can think of. And it wasn't only until, I started meeting certain people that they just had a different energy. And they were living in a way that I wanted. Like I really saw them as role models, and they were telling me things like, "Hey, yeah, I don't eat animals. I don't touch that. when I stopped eating animals, I felt like Superman. That was somebody I seen that was just, as tall as me and even way more muscle, like just big, swole guy. And I was like, wait a minute, you don't eat, huh? Like what about what everybody's talking about? Like all this protein, where are you getting all it? He's like, man, when I stopped eating animals, I felt like Superman. And he put me on the Game Changers. That was a documentary that catapulted me into another documentary, and then went into another documentary. And then when I watched that one, that's when everything changed. So I could never go back. It was like that was a turning point for me, because Arnold Ehret, I have his book Rational Fasting, and you spoke earlier, Aharona, about coming up when, even back in Hebrew school, you said there was like an organic kitchen or some
Oh,
place. There
no,
was
no, that was way later. That
way
was like,
later. Okay, so what was the place where you said that was the only place that they had the organic kitchen?
oh, that was like at a Rainbow Family Gathering, Rainbow Family Gatherings?
Rainbow Family.
Rainbow Family. It's
Okay.
the whole thing.
Okay.
I used to, like, years ago, go to some Rainbow Family Gatherings, and this was like shortly after that time in Ghana. I had come back to the States, and yeah. But by
Okay.
then, I was into the organic foods, and
Yeah.
yeah.
So then what was the shift that made you go vegan, and did you ever bounce
Mm.
back? Like some people go back and forth, up and down,
So,
in and out. Yeah.
so let's see. Grew up eating horrible. Then, although I will say, okay, if my mom ever listens to this, shout out to my mom, because she sometimes when we talk about this, she's like gets a little upset because she made a good dinner every night, like we had balanced diet kind of thing. I mean, it wasn't just like pure crap 100% all the time. It wasn't just candy bars and chips and nothing else.
No.
Like she made a lot of effort to like make a good dinner every night, even though she was working and da da da. So shout out for that. But yeah, so I went from that, and then by the time I was like later years of high school, I really wanted to be a vegetarian just because I loved animals. Started, putting that together. But my mom wasn't about to change anything, so it didn't really happen till I left home for college. And then my first year at school, started eating vegetarian, but like didn't know how to do it in a healthy way at all. I mean, it was just kind of like a lot of pasta and whatever. Then my second year of school, I transferred to a different school, and they had this like really strong animal rights group. And of course I joined that, and then that's where I learned about factory farming.
Yes.
And so then right away I became vegan, and it was really easy at that school because it was like that school was very on campus. Like everybody lives on campus. It was a small school, and everybody eats in the cafeteria. And because of this animal rights group, they had already made it so that there's always a vegan option in the cafeteria. I mean, this was back a long time ago, where like that is not necessarily a common thing.
Right.
I mean, this was like the late 90s.
Yeah.
So
Definitely not common.
yeah, so that was great. And then by the end of that time I was in school, I had gotten into like eating organic. And then it was like, by the time I was graduating, it's like, whoa, organic food is like really crazy expensive, and I need to just like learn how to grow my own food. So then I started doing like organic farming, and I did a lot of like work trade situations. Like, I don't know if you've ever heard of woofing, willing workers on farms. So I used to do a lot of that kind of thing. And all of that just kind of brought me into a more natural way of living. And then, I mean, big things that happened were like, so, okay, more of my backstory.
Yeah,
So
of course. We're
when
here
I
for it.
was in college,
Mm-hmm.
I went for the first time to West Africa, to Ghana, on like a semester abroad
Yeah.
program. And my school was really big on study abroad opportunities. And I always, like, since I was a kid, had always felt drawn to Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was like, you know, as long as your grades were okay, they made it very easy for you to just like go wherever you want to go.
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up going to Ghana and I totally fell in love with it and like just wanted to stay and live there. And I ended up dropping out of the program that I went with and had a kind of crazy time and realized like, okay, if you're gonna live here and be a part of the culture, you actually have to be ready to like get married and have children because that's what women your age do in this culture, you know. So anyway, so then I ended up going back when the other students left at the last minute. I decided to leave, go back, finish school, kind of just barely, and then got into the organic farming kind of stuff. And then I went back to Ghana like 2 years later when I was ready to like, okay, I'm ready to fully, you know, do what it takes to be there and be a part of the culture there. And that's when I was living without my glasses. Like that's around the time that I started getting into natural vision improvement. And I was like, okay, I'm in Ghana. Like I don't use computers. I'm not driving. You know, like I can manage here without seeing clearly at all, you know? And also just the bright sunlight, like the sunlight helps so much with seeing clearly. So it was just this great opportunity. And so anyway, had a great experience there.
Yeah.
Another story for another time. But what I want to say about it in terms of all this is that I did get malaria a few times.
Oh, a
And
few times.
yes.
Okay.
So malaria over there is kind of like people get malaria like how we get the flu. You know, like if you're going to get sick, it's going to turn into malaria. Whereas here, if we get sick, you know, it's going to be like a cold or maybe a flu or something like that.
Okay.
So I got sick a few times, and there was one time where it got super serious, which I was actually back in the States and it was like in my system. So it was like right after I returned, got super sick, almost died, had to have 2 blood transfusions, like major thing that happened. And then, then after that, like some other things happened. I ended up back in the States and then ended up back in British Columbia, which is where I had been kind of mostly living before going back to Ghana. And so this was like 2001 now. And the people that I had been living with most of the time in British Columbia had just learned about raw foods and fasting and cleansing. And I started hearing how, like, on a raw foods diet, people don't get sick anymore, and how fasting can, you know, save your life, and da da da. And I was like, okay, here is the way to live back in Ghana because I still just was like solely, I couldn't see, like, I love where I live now in Santa Cruz, California, but I had never been here back then. And I really didn't like anywhere in America. And British Columbia was great, but I couldn't find West African dance out there, which I was already addicted to. And it was friggin' cold. Like every November, I'd be like, okay, I gotta go somewhere south for a while. I didn't want to live somewhere that I had to always be traveling every winter or something. So anyway, I still was like, Ghana is where I love. I want to be back there eventually. And I knew that in order to live there, I needed to find a way to like stay healthy and not get malaria again.
Right.
So that was kind of like my biggest reason in the first place to pursue like, okay, let's try out this raw foods thing. Let's try out fasting and stuff like that. But then, of course, like, as soon as I started that, it was like, whoa, now I'm like in a whole new reality. Like, I immediately, like, within the first week of just cutting out cooked food, it was like I had so my physical body felt so much better. I had so much mental clarity. Like, everything was 1,000 times better. And then, you know, it just like those first few years, like 2001 to like 2005 or so, it was this progression from like just getting into raw foods and like doing short fasts to by the end in 2005 feeling like, okay, I feel so much better when I'm just on juice, which at the time and really always, like, I've always done like one mono diet kind of juice that's like working for me at the time, and mostly like really affordable ways to do it, like not like, oh, I have a juicer and I'm like getting all these fresh fruits and veggies and juicing. But anyway, so um yeah, by like 2005 it was like, okay, I just feel better. It doesn't feel like I'm fasting anymore. It's just like, this is how I feel good. And that's when like someone gave me a copy of Jazz Mahin's Living on Light, and it was like, oh, there's this thing. And then in 2006 I did my first pranic process, like in that old school Jazz Mahin style
21,
way, from
21 day.
the 21-day thing, but like how Jazz Maheen lays out in Living on Light. So anyway, during that time, those first few formative years of getting into this stuff, it was just like this progression of, pretty quickly feeling like, okay, the raw food thing is great, but nuts and seeds, like, that is really heavy stuff and that is not feeling good. And I really feel best when I'm just on fruits and greens. And then, um, then that's when I found Arnold Ehret's mucusless diet healing system and just started like reading tons and like experimenting with tons and doing a bunch of different kind of cleansing things. And um like the colonics and fasting and enemas and doing different, like, all kinds of different cleansing things. And
Yes.
yeah, and it just, like you were saying before, something about like not turning back, it just became like I cannot turn back, because throughout, even in just those first few years, it was like I was getting so sensitive to how things affect me. Because it's like when you cut something out for a while, I always tell people you have to cut something out for like 3 months to feel what it's actually doing to your body. And then after you haven't had it for a few months, then try it and see how you feel. And that's how it's
Yes.
affecting you. But if you're just doing it all the time, you just feel the way you feel and you don't even have any idea that there's some other way to feel. And it's like, throughout this process of, almost about 25 years now of dietary changes, there's always a new level of like, wow, this feels really good, and it's always deeper and deeper. Like, even if I'm staying super light, well, first of all, we know, of course, like there's, the ultimate light of these people who are like not consuming anything at all. And, who knows how that's going to feel. But even when I'm doing like my version of, what is light for me at that time, it's like the deeper I go with it and the lighter I get, the more awareness I get, and the deeper the practices I do get, and everything just gets so much better, better, better. Yeah, but it's definitely like this, I hit this point of no turning back in terms of like, if I am gonna eat something that I've already cut out of my diet, I need to be prepared to feel sick afterwards, you know? And that's not to say that I never do that. Like, there are still times that I'll eat something that I know I'm not going to feel great after, but for whatever reason, I really want it and I'm choosing to do it. But it's like, I'm not going to do that when I have like dance class the next day or like something that I really care about the next
Right.
day, because I know I'm not going to feel great after that, you know? But, you know, that being said, like there are certain things that were just like so awful that, you know, you try it once and it's like never again.
Yeah.
Like I remember when I first got into raw foods and cleansing and all this, and the first time I went and visited my mom, she had a bag of my favorite kind of organic chips, these tortilla chips that I used to love, like, you know, so long ago, like 25 years ago or whatever.
Yeah.
And I like went for it and I was like, okay, yeah, I'm on vacation with my mom. Oh my God. I can still remember how sick I felt. And it was like 25 years ago or 24 years ago. I mean, it was like I've never eaten another fried thing again, ever. It's just like fried food is the one thing that's just,
Yeah.
and animal flesh too. Like I've never gone back to that because it's totally
Yeah.
unappealing.
Yeah, yeah. I spoke with a lady. You're giving me chills because I spoke with a lady, and I remember she told me this, Aharona. She's big into like frequency, energy, and vibration, and she said that fried food is literally on like the frequency of death. This is what she said. She said is on the frequency of death.
Oh, I believe it.
I
Yeah.
was like, oh my God, you know, like she said, deep fried food, when it's totally deep fried, there's no life in it. Like it's just, there's no life. There's no life in it. And I totally, I mean, I get you on every level. I resonate on every
Mhm.
level because, yeah, I still remember, even though it was a while back, like the last thing that I had that really gave me that reaction. And I was like, whoa. And I had never had that reaction from that before. But just like you said, you said, you know, go 90 days or go like 3 months without something in your system. And then when you assimilate it back, when you integrate it back into your system, and your body has to process it again, it has to break it down again, and then see how you feel. And like that's what's happening for real. You
Yeah.
know, that's actually what's happening. So I mean, there was so many times where I felt like, am I just poisoning myself intentionally? Like, what did I do? Like, my body, it was
Yeah.
a slap in the face. It was like, wake up. You know, this is what you've been doing. This is what you've been chewing,
Yeah.
you know? So thank you for
Yeah.
this testimony.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank
Like
you.
that's why like nowadays I really like to, if I'm gonna have some solid food thing,
Mm.
which I still do sometimes. I mean, in the past anyway, who knows what the future holds. But, I know like at least when I go visit my mom, I like to partake in certain things with her. So I'm sure, there's still some in my future at least, and probably more than that. But anyway, I like to go into that experience really light, because then it's like I really feel what's happening. Whereas if I've been like having, like for me at this point, so to continue on from what I was saying about like everything affects me, like nothing feels good at this point. I have one drink that I make that like feels fine for me. Everything else is gonna kind of be not so great, but that's not to say that sometimes I don't feel this overwhelming need to have some density. And for whatever reason, like there are some reasons that I identify. But so at this point, it's like the only thing that feels kind of okay is when I make a soup. And for me, it's just like a very simple thing, like taking one thing when it's in season. I use zucchini because zucchini is like so watery when you boil it that it's just like, very little substance to it. Just like boil it in water, blend it up, and there's your soup, and then in the winter time when zucchini isn't available around here, because I only like to buy locally grown produce, like potato or red kabocha squash sometimes works well. So there's like a few things that, my body kind of is used to, and it might not be the best thing for it, but it can handle it, and it's not going to punish me too much for doing it. And so I can kind of like get away with it. But yeah, I mean, even back in those days, what I was starting to say, it's like you get so sensitive that it becomes just this easy, natural progression of lightening up, or, continuing on the cleansing path, or like evolving, deeper and deeper with this, because you just get more and more, or at least my experience, I got more and more and more sensitive to where it's just like, okay, everything is just, you know, everything has an effect on me. And even, fruits, which at one time were like so helpful for me, it's like I cannot eat sweet fruit anymore. It just brings me out of balance. Even if I make it as a juice, like even if I take it and blend it with water and, water it down, it's like it'll kind of take me out of balance, and that just leads me to want to consume something else to bring myself back into balance. Like the last time that I was using fruits a lot, I mean, over all those years I used fruit a lot, like a lot, because fruit is very cleansing. I mean, like the first thing I used a lot of in my whole cleansing process was not fruit, but greens, and particularly kale was just like a broom, like sweeping out my system, sweeping out my system. So like in that first year or maybe couple years of getting into raw foods and cleansing, it was like I just every day wanted like a huge amount of kale, and better if I eat it with some kind of fat to help it move through, like a good oil or avocado mashed up with some lemon or apple cider vinegar or something to just like get the kale easier to move through my system. But that was like huge. And then once all that like really old heavy stuff was kind of out, then it's like the fruits go into a deeper level of cleansing. So, I use fruits, whether just eating whole fruits or, blending them up into a juice eventually, for a really long time. But then after a while, first of all, each fruit has an effect. Like certain things, I mean, first of all, banana was the first thing to go, because I will say, I mean, and you're commending me for my vulnerability and openness. I like to be an open book and be open about all this stuff. And if Regina's listening, she knows what's about to come. But bananas, like the tiniest little bit of banana will completely constipate me. And that's been that way since like early on in this process, like since the very beginning. So, that was the first fruit to go, because even, like one time I years later accidentally had a smoothie someone made me that they told me the ingredients. They failed to mention they put a little bit of banana in it, like super completely constipated after that. So no bananas. But then, the other fruits that really were working for me for a long time, they all have an effect. And when you just do like a mono diet of this thing, you start to feel the effect. So like for years, I used to do, after that first process, which happened in 2006. I did that process in Brazil, and the way they did juice there was like taking a fruit, blending it up with water and honey.
Okay.
So it wasn't like a juice like you put through a juicer, but more like a blended fruit juice. And I stuck with that for like many, many, many years after. And I used to use papaya or mango or peach or some combination of those. And then, after a year at the most, it was like, whoa, papaya is like super heating. So had to stop papaya. And then eventually mango too is very heating. So it's like, it just like burns out the system. So mango eventually had to let go of, and
Heating.
like it just heats the system up.
Okay. Okay.
Like every food is like kind of generally either cooling, like cucumber is really cooling, or heating, like mango and papaya. Garlic is like the ultimate heat. I mean, that I had to give up very early on. But like onion and garlic, like how I said the very worst thing, fried food, like I don't think I would ever try that again. Kind of the things that are the worst for me, that feel the worst in me, any kind of cooked oil, like it doesn't need to be fried, but cooking oil at all, like even if it's just sauteed, anything, any kind of cooked oil feels absolutely horrible in my system. Onion and garlic feel terrible in my system, and salt. Ever since I did that first process in 2006, it was like, I cannot handle salt. It just makes me feel so awful. So, but yeah, everything has an effect.
For sure.
Yeah.
There, we have so many substances that, we deem crucial or necessary for, what we feel are nutrients, our vitamins, our minerals. And I had to challenge myself when I was going through these same processes that like, I don't know anything. All I know is how I feel in my body,
Yeah. And that's
That's what
all that's your guide, the body will
right.
guide you. It's like it wants to feel good. It wants to feel healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that I love, like that I just have to mention, that throughout all these years, and my journey with this has been like super up and down. I mean, yes, there's been a progression of cutting things out, lightening up, but periods of like, no, like in that first year of getting into raw foods, had just this like could not stop thinking about the Chicago style deep dish pizza of my childhood, and had to like go visit my mom for a couple months and just eat a ton of pizza and then just be done with it, like never wanted it again. And actually recently I was at her house with my niece and nephew, and they all like, that's their main thing that they want to eat when they get to Chicago, is the Chicago style deep dish pizza. And I was like, I wonder what would happen if I put a piece in my mouth. And I like took a piece of my mom's pizza and put it in my mouth, and I immediately had to spit it out. It was just like, wow. Not even chewing it, just like having it in my mouth. It was like so revolting to me. So, okay, I'm glad now that I got it out of my system. But what I wanted to say is, during those times where you just feel so shitty because you're eating this thing that's like making you feel awful, it's going to make you feel awful. And your addiction is just taking over. You can't control it, or, however you want to call it. I think most of the time it is addiction. We're like fighting this addiction and trying to get out of it. But for whatever reason, you're in there, you feel like crap. Eventually you're going to come out of it. And when you come out of it, the thing that I always just amazed me and I loved and appreciated so much was that like I would always feel like this divine energy of grace and forgiveness would just welcome me back. You know, as soon as I like took the steps to lighten up a little bit, it's like, okay, like I'm conscious again. It's okay. You know, like I can continue on this path. And I do feel the divine more. Cause I mean, for me, that's also like a huge part of this whole thing of like, why do I do this? Why do I want to be lightening up all the time? It's because like, the lighter I am, the more I feel the divine, and the more, you know, that connection just stays stable. And so it's like this like embrace of the divine, like welcoming you back in when you get out of those periods. You know, that's a really nice experience.
It
And it's
is.
always there. You know, it has never failed to be there.
Yes.
And another thing that I want to mention about those like dark periods where you're just down is like I learned really early on, probably during that Chicago style deep dish pizza phase back in like 2001 or something, where I learned very early that kicking yourself while you're down, it's just, it doesn't help, you know? Like, I would just beat myself up, like, why did you do this? Like, this was so stupid. You keep doing the same thing. You feel awful. Why are you doing this? And that never helped deter me from doing it again. All it did was make me more miserable in the moment.
Mhm.
And things started to improve when I started to just love myself through whatever I was choosing to experience, you know? And it's still the same today. You know, I'm not, you know, going for Chicago style deep dish pizza, but I still have my things that I'll go for sometimes, even though I know I'm not going to feel so good afterwards. And, you know, they're much like lighter, cleaner things now, but they're still not great for me. And it's like, okay, I'm conscious of this and I'm choosing to have this experience. And it's not, you know, like this experience is good and this experience is bad. It's just this is a certain kind of experience or a certain way to experience myself. And this is another way to experience myself and the world and life. And if I'm choosing to do this way, I want to, you know, have the full experience. And there's a reason why I choose the light way and mostly, you know, always want to be doing that. But, you know, let's deal with all the parts of myself that are still roaming around in there and calling for attention and just like love all of it, you know, love the whole self.
Absolutely. The whole, you know, wholeness, just
Yeah.
the whole complete self and just, you know, even the parts that we feel are hard to love or we feel the aspects of ourself that we don't want to look at, you know, the shadow self, the shadow side, the shadow work, you know, that we have to do with, like you said, Aharona, the guilt, the shame, you know, and the blame, you know, all of that, all of those games with the guilt and the shame, and just, you know, how do we maintain with all that guilt and that shame? How do we feel self-sustained with the guilt and the shame? So, you know, this was the same, like when I was going through change that I had to rearrange for sure in my life. When, I mean, looking at myself in the mirror and just having to give myself these loving affirmations to really shift my vibration in the situation, like not waiting for things to be different before I loved myself enough.
Yeah.
And for me to feel that I was more than enough and that I was worthy, you know, the self-worthiness, the self-image, the self-confidence, the self-esteem, just the self that we, you know, it's not even about anyone else, but it's who you are when you're just with yourself.
Hmm.
You know, we've been with ourselves since the beginning and we're going to be with ourselves for the rest of our lives. So it's
Yeah.
like, you know, you got to get in tune and in touch with that person that's looking at you in the mirror for sure. So thank you for this message because, I mean, during this conversation, like, there's been so many, I don't even want to, you know, no pun intended, but there's been so many aha moments, like for me, you know, like just so many connections with all your reflections, and I've been just, there's been so many things that I wanted to unpack and ask you even more to dive even deeper, but I want to respect your time. There are more questions that I had for you. I just want to make sure that you have time
Yeah,
available.
I do. It's 4 o'clock. Yeah, I'm totally good.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. So, for one of the things when you mentioned being in Ghana, being in West Africa, and you mentioned that malaria is like, the common cold. It's like getting the flu, like getting malaria. You got malaria multiple times. And then when you mentioned, you came back to the States and you said you almost died and you had to get two blood transfusions
Yeah.
and you almost died. So if anybody is listening to you and they've never had malaria before, can you just describe what it actually feels like to have malaria? And then how was that time where you felt like your whole life was about to be over? Can you talk about that?
Sure. I mean, I don't even like to think about how malaria feels. It feels so awful.
Okay.
It's like, I mean, I can tell you, the symptoms is like you get, like in Ghana, we called it, not that I'm there anymore, runny stomach, like diarrhea. So you lose all your liquids. And what malaria is, it's a blood parasite. So that's why, mosquitoes carry it and you get it from a mosquito. But I will say that, I I kept myself healthy through blood cleansing. Like I used to drink blood cleansing herbal teas all the time. And the best one is neem, which is like right there. We had a huge neem tree on our property, and I would just like make a neem tea every day, and I stayed healthy. And then it was during this time where my husband and I were like very disorganized. We were getting ready to travel, and just like everything got crazy, and we weren't getting food from the market to prepare ourselves because uh, every day we thought we were leaving. And then it's a whole long story, but he was having a really hard time with like going to visit his family, and every day found some excuse of like, no, I need to go do this first, So we were super disorganized at that time. And I wasn't on top of making my tea. And meanwhile, we were just kind of, because we weren't getting food from the market, this was like way before I knew about, fasting or cleansing, all that stuff. Uh, we would just get like what's available in the village, like already made street food. And during that time, unfortunately, like the only thing that was really available was fried yam. So it was like I was eating a lot of fried yam and not doing the blood cleansing tea. And that's when I got malaria. So it's like I believe that, whether those bitter blood cleansing herbs are just cleaning your blood so much that the parasite doesn't have anything to eat, or whether it's that it's actually cleaning out the parasite, whatever. But, when I started learning about raw foods and fasting and cleansing, like I said, my number one thing was like, I need to learn how to be healthy so that I can get back there. It was like, oh, well, I know that I was keeping myself healthy through cleaning my blood, but what if there's nothing to clean in the first place? What if I just start off from a clean place? And I have been back since then. I went back in 2018, and I wasn't there super long, but I never had any kind of problems with malaria or anything. But so anyway, but back to what you're asking about. I mean, it just feels horrible. You lose all your liquids. You're what happens is the parasites go into your blood cells. They eat them up or eat up all the waste in there or whatever it is. Meanwhile, they reproduce. And then, depending on what kind of malaria you have, there's like a cycle. And the kind that I had, it's like a 48-hour cycle. So for 48 hours, they're just in there munching away and reproducing. And then at the end of those 2 days, they ate up everything. So they break free and release all their little babies to go attack more blood cells. And then you get a fever. And so it's like, I would have and it starts off slow. That's the thing with malaria. It's so hard because it's at first you're like, oh, it's just, I feel a little weird. Like, maybe I'm getting something, but maybe I'm okay. And then it takes, a 48-hour cycle. So like you feel okay the next day.
Right.
But then, the second night, after that first night, you feel bad again.
Right.
And then you're like, oh, I really don't feel good. And then it's like, you're fine the next day. So maybe I'm getting better. And then, whoa, the next night, it's like really way worse. And then if you wait and it becomes the next 48-hour period, you're screwed,
Oh, man.
And so it can get out of control really fast. And it's a very unfortunate thing when people don't catch it early enough. And for me, what happened was that, like the first time I had it, we did catch it early enough and like went heavy on the cleansing herbs and just dealt with it. And it's easy to deal with there if you catch it, because whether you're using herbs, which are growing right there, or whether you go to the hospital and it's just like common there, like you're put in a whole big ward full of people with malaria and you're all treated the same and you get out of there. Like they know how to deal with it. But after I came back, so I got sick, we finally went on that trip. Then I had another like month or two before, no, maybe month, I don't know, some period of time. And then I came back and obviously it was like in my system. And I came back, I landed in New York City. I spent a little time in New York City. Of course I was eating crazy. Of course I was eating like pizza, New York pizza, vegan pizza at that time. And just like yummy stuff, whatever. And I got sick again. And again, it was that thing of like, maybe it's not malaria, And then by the time I was like, oh, I'm pretty sick. I also, at that time, I didn't know what to do because I didn't have any money. I didn't have health insurance. In Ghana, no problem. Everything's cheap. You go to the hospital, you can afford it. But in the States, I was just like, I don't have money to go see a doctor. Like, what do I do? So I waited too long and then it got like critical. And then it was like some friends swooped me up, some friends that were living in Maine, who actually, this one good friend who like saved my life twice now. She was with me my first time in Ghana and she was living in Maine. I was in New York. She was like, I think you need to get up here so we can take care of you. And her mom was a doctor. Well, she was a professor of medicine. And so she like explained to me what I explained to you about how malaria works. And she was like, you're fine tonight because you made it up here. You had your day of feeling fine, but tomorrow night you're going to have another fever and we need to go to the hospital tomorrow. And I was like, okay, whatever. At this point, just do whatever, take care of me. I don't care. And so like when you say, how did it feel to be like on death's door? There was no feeling. I didn't care about anything at that point. Like at the time that day that I went to the hospital and by the time evening came around and the fever started coming, it was like I was trying to think of things that would make me want to live. Like I was thinking about my husband back in Ghana and my late husband, he's no longer with us, but I was thinking about him and our future together and just like trying to like produce some will to live. And it was gone. It was like, if I was not in those people's hands in this like tiny little hospital in rural Maine, I would have been a goner. But they like took action and, you know, gave me a shit ton of drugs and 2 blood transfusions and like did what it took. And then I came back to life.
Jesus, Jesus
So
Christ, Jesus.
that's
Oh
my,
my gosh. Aha, my goodness. Like I'm glad first of all, I'm glad you're still here, you know?
me
Like
too.
like I'm thankful you're here. I'm grateful you're still here
Yeah.
because what you mentioned just now about, you know, just not even having anything to hold on to. Like there was nothing to hold on to. Like, you know, some people they go into a place where or they go into a space where they tap into a higher power or, you know, the ancestors or spirit guides or angels, you know, like angelic beings. You're saying
Mhm.
there was just zero, there was just nothing. Like
Well,
you had nothing.
I will say that the previous fever, the one just before that day, um, like the one that led my main friend to be like, okay, you need to just get up here so we can take care of you. That night I did see the divine. Like that night, full on, yeah, like the fever came on, and then it was just in conversation with the divine who was leading me through like how to survive, you know, like, okay, here's how you need to like move your body to like not freeze to death, because you're like freezing. Like it's such a high fever that you're so cold, you know? So like that first night in the hospital when the super high fever came on, the first thing they did just to like manage the fever so I don't just like blow out and die is they put me on a hospital bed. They put a little anal probe up my butt, which was connected to a machine that read my temperature. And the machine was connected to this sheet that was under me on the bed. And as my temperature would go up, the sheet would get colder. So it was literally just, you know, and I've heard about people with malaria getting these high fevers and people have to just like throw buckets of ice on them to just keep the fever from like completely burning you out and killing you, you know? So it was just like torture that first night in the hospital because you're freezing. All you want is like a blanket, some warm water, like you're so cold. And then you're like, I was on this like sheet of ice. I mean, I was privileged enough to be on a sheet of ice. Like most people in the throes of malaria, they're not given that treatment. Like I recently had someone very close to me pass away from malaria, which was like a complete shocker, but he was in Africa and I'm sure he did not get the same like save your life kind of treatment that I was receiving. So, you know, okay, I'm thankful for that. But whoa, at the time, it just was like torture. Yeah. So that previous fever, yeah, it was like I was freezing and just like this talking through of like, here's how you need to like deal with your body right now to like make it through the night. And then there was this message that came through that I was supposed to deliver to that friend in Maine who I had just reconnected with and been talking to earlier that night. It was like, okay, when you get up in the morning, you need to call Becky immediately and tell her da 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 da. And it just like kept getting repeated to me. And meanwhile, I'm like seeing the face of God. Like it was very clear that I am in conversation with the divine, you know. And by the way, she looked just like me, you know,
Wow.
like my little face. And that's the divine self talking to you. Okay. So I made it through that night. I called my friend Becky in the morning, and like before I could even get any of my message out, she was like, "Do I need to come down there and get you and take care of you?" I was like, yeah. And so that happened. But yeah, then that next night was just there was nothing. It was like I'm sure I would have been a goner if I wasn't in someone else's hands by then.
Yeah, I mean, you're in this, we're in this reality, we're in this timeline, we're in a whole different timeline that, that crossroads of how things could have gone left, but they went in another way. They went in a
Yeah.
different direction, because to even have this gratitude that you have now, and to understand that you were still, even at your lowest, at the lowest of the low, still being guided, still being protected, and still having, a divine being, like you said, it was you. You saw, yourself. You said she
Hmm.
looked just like me. This being of
Yeah.
divinity that was giving me clear instructions on what I needed to do. She was just like me. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that whole like reality of self-realization of, realizing the divine within, all of that started happening for me my first trip to Ghana. And that's so much a part of why I fell in love with Ghana and wanted to be there, was this God consciousness all around me. Like the people there is just like everyone's just kind of aware of God, like whatever religion they're practicing or however they feel it, whatever. It's like people are just aware of the divine there. And that's when that trip, like I started hanging out with Rastafarians and they, educated me a lot. And that was just like the first time I really started to experience. I mean, I had started in the year or two before that to have kind of like a religious experience or divine experience through dance. Like that's what, when I was in college is when I first started dancing ever. And, just like feeling that divine within, feeling that connection with the music, feeling how the music is just moving your body and feeling that connection with the other people dancing around you and all of that. So then, I went to Ghana and that awareness of the divine got like really big. And then, I mean, I guess what I'm wanting to mention here is like you were saying, uh, not just about, you know, seeing that divine within, getting me through my malaria experience, but I had another really life-changing experience shortly after that, just like some months later, which was that my husband in Ghana passed away, like very suddenly, unexpectedly. And it was like, losing half of myself and also losing, obviously, husband, best friend, partner, my whole future in Ghana. Like, I didn't have anywhere I wanted to live other than Ghana. And we had this whole bright future planned. And so it was like at that time, like when you're saying how when I was really at the peak of malaria and I had nothing to hold on to. At that time, I felt like I lost absolutely everything except the divine. Like the one thing that remained for me was the divine. And looking back on it, I recently lost another person and such a different experience right now because I've been living in Santa Cruz for like almost 13 years now, and I have a really strong community here, and I have a life here,
Right.
But at that time in Ghana, my whole life was there. So it was like, really just felt like I lost everything except the divine. It was like the divine was like this, it's just always there. It always remains. And I can recognize that the divine that I loved within my husband, like, yes, of course, I loved my husband as a person, but mostly what we loved about being together was like seeing the divine within each other.
Mm,
And it was always like the spiritual aspect that was like the strongest piece for us.
mm,
So I could see, like, yes, you know, the divine that I loved in him is also in me, you know, like it's not going anywhere. So, okay, there's that, you know. And so from now on, I'm just gonna do the things that make me feel that the most, like that make me most aware of that divine aspect, because that's all I really care about, is like that's all I really love, that's all I really want to be with, is the divine in whatever form. And so that's like, you know, back in Ghana, it was like I started dancing again, and dancing, doing West African dance was like what kept me wanting to fall. Because that first year was very rough. I really didn't have a desire to live, but it was like, okay, woke up again. Here we are, gonna live another day, you know. But dance was like the one thing that brought me joy and made me want to live. And then, like a year after his passing, is when I was back in British Columbia and with those people who told me about raw foods and fasting. And that was like a real turning point. And I kind of, at the 1 year marker, it was like, okay, I need to decide whether I'm going to be fully alive or remaining in this like not fully living kind of place where I'm just in grief and mourning and still just wanting to be with my life. And then it was like, whoa, it's a new life. Because then, you know, as soon as I got into raw foods, like I said, I felt totally different and so much more alive than ever before. And then, you know, it started me on that path of like more and more and more.
and more. So many
Yeah.
levels, you know, so many levels of awakening, so many levels of enlightenment, so many levels of just opening yourself up to the divine. You know, I love what you say that, you know, that's all you want to do with your time is to be with the divine, you know? Like, is that,
Mm-hmm.
would you say that that's the purpose of life for you now? Do you feel like that's the purpose, or what would you call the purpose of life and living? Is it just to be with the divine? Is that why we're here?
Um, Here, experiencing what we experience. And for me, it's like, I want to enjoy this experience. I want to fully experience this experience. Like everything that happens, whether joyous or painful, whatever, I want to like fully feel it. And yeah, I mean, in terms of what I do with my life, like that's where the divine thing comes more into play for me. Like I don't really get into like thinking too much or like getting too heady about like what's the purpose of life, or you know, why am I here, or da 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 da. I mean, I think there's a gazillion reasons why I'm here, why you're here, why we're all doing the things we're doing. But what I know is that I am like the most blissed out and happy when I, everything okay? Can you hear me?
Okay, a little bit. Okay, now we're good. We're good now.
Okay.
Awesome.
So,
Yeah. The last thing I heard was you was like the one thing I know was, and you just it kind of went out. Yeah.
okay. The one thing I know is, what was the one thing I know? Maybe I was saying the one thing I know most when I am aware of the divine, when I feel the divine. So when I'm conscious of that divine presence, like that's what makes me super happy and blissed out. And like that's the state that I want to be in all the time. So then, like definitely, especially ever since my husband passed away, and like I had a lot of desires in my life back then, like in my very early 20s. It was like I had a whole future I was seeing in Ghana. I wanted to have a family, have children, have an organic farm, grow all our own food, whatever, whatever. And very in love with my husband, like very full on union with him. And so losing all of that, it's really like, wow, you just have a fresh start and all you have left is the divine. So the only thing left to do is like the things that make you feel the divine the most. So for me, in the beginning, I discovered dietary bridges to the divine. It was like dance, dance, first of all, and using medicinal fungus or herbs, like I was eating a lot of mushrooms and ganja a lot, like anything that made my awareness increased and like brought me into that. And then when I, after that first year got into the raw foods and cleansing, it was like, whoa, like that's when I stopped using ganja or, fungus, anything like that. And it was just like, I don't need any medicine because I'm like high all the time and like, feeling conscious all the time. And I mean, there have been periods of time during all those years where I went so heavy into all these years. It's like, yes, okay, definitely dancing is like my favorite thing to do, like number one. If I have my choice of what I'm going to go do, it's going to be like dance to some African music that I really, really love, especially if, members of my community are there and we're all loving each other. That's just like the highest high.
Okay.
I mean, given that I don't have a partner, because I know from the past that there's like a higher high that you can achieve with a partner, perhaps. But, my life as it is now, like I've been pretty much on my own since my husband passed away, with some brief exceptions. Um, so it's like, yes, dancing is what, might bring me the highest, but the thing that is like the most stable foundation, like, unwavering bridge to the divine is for me is the diet. Like if I stay light with my diet, no worries, the divine is always there.
Okay.
And I mean,
So,
do all these other practices that help too. Like I have this enormous yoga practice that actually takes up a lot of my day, and that helps too. Like it, but for me, yeah, the diet has been like the most profound, transformative thing. And like I said before, like there's so many reasons why I do this thing that I do with my diet. And it's not because I don't like food, like I grew up really liking food. And even after getting, vegan and then into the organics and like healthy food, like I was very foodie kind of person. And I used to like live in community all the time. I was always the person in the kitchen making food for everybody, you know, coming up with all this great stuff. So it's not like food has been an easy thing for me to let go of. But, you know, for one thing, there's that no turning back kind of aspect that we talked about before, where it just becomes so unpleasant to eat that eventually you just don't want to keep doing that experience where you feel really good. But yeah, the other thing is just like I said before, like the biggest reason is that presence in the moment and that consciousness and awareness and all that. And also like that is so, for me, that is so tied to love,
Yeah.
you know? And that's the other like huge thing that I think about in terms of why am I doing this thing that I'm doing, you know? And I I mean, if you ask people who know me, I think pretty much everyone would say that like I'm a very loving person in general, all the time, whether I'm eating, not eating, whatever. I'm a very loving person. But when I go really light, it's like I feel like I'm really loving. Like
Wow.
I feel my capacity for love expand so much, you know, like so much that sometimes it's overwhelming and I need to like calm myself down because I just feel like I'm going to explode from it all. But that experience of love, it's like that is so much of the divine experience, whether it's, you know, seeing the divine one within and loving ourselves and that kind of self-realization love, or whether you're like bouncing off other people and like sharing love and it's just pouring out of you and pouring into you, and you know, then it's like even higher, 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 you know. So yeah, what was the question?
No.
I don't know, but
No,
like the
you know
purpose
what? No,
of all this,
no
like
matter
why are we doing this, why do we
no
do what we
matter
do?
no matter
Like
like
I just want to love, you know, like
love is the answer. Love is the answer no matter the question, you know?
exactly.
No matter the question, love is the
Love
answer. Love
answer.
is the answer. So thank you, Aha. Thank you so much for this. Thank
Yeah,
you for
thank
these testimonies.
you.
Thank you just for giving of yourself, like for letting your cup runneth over. Your cup runneth over. You're just pouring from the overflow of love in your container that you're just spilling and letting people, you know, just drink, you know, from the love that you've already poured in your cup. You've already filled it to the top and just letting it spill from the brim. I just love how you love and express love and be the embodiment that people see of the divinity, you know, the divine one within that Jasmine talks about in her books, you know, Food of the Gods and Pranic Nourishment 101, and just these books that she spoke about just love. And even when you listen to her meditations, Jasmine, her meditations, she's just oozing love into your
Mm.
eardrums, you know, just like oozing nothing but love and just expansion. So thank you so much. This has been amazing. This has been transformational on every
Thank you
level. And I just,
much.
yeah, want to honor you today. If there's anybody that, you know, wants to get in touch with you or in tune with you, I know you're not here on social media, but is there any website that has any offerings or anything for anybody that would like to get in tune with you more?
Definitely. I love to get in touch with people. Like this stuff is like my favorite stuff to talk about, you know? So I'm always happy for people to reach out. I have a website. It's my yoga website for my yoga classes here and stuff. So I can write it down for you or something, but it's just ashtangayogasantacruz.com.
Awesome.
And my email is on there, but yeah, my email is like a good initial way to reach me. But yeah, I'm on WhatsApp and all the things. And definitely, if anyone feels like they want to get in touch, I'd love to hear from people.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks for just inviting that in and opening that. And my goodness, enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much. It was really nice to meet you and chat with you.
Yes. 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 We'll do it again sometime. We'll do it again.
Okay,
All right.
sounds good.
Take care.